They tore the silk straight from her body before she could even take a breath. The sound of ripping fabric sliced through the music, and for a suspended second, every glittering guest in the Hamptons ballroom turned toward Emma Carter as if she were prey caught beneath a spotlight. Margaret Caldwell's fingers sharp as lacquered claws dug into Emma's shoulder, while Olivia Caldwell yanked at the back of her dress with eager cruelty. The gown gave way in one brutal pull. Gasps rippled like a wave through the crowd of more than 200 people, their diamond-studded wrists lifting phones before sympathy could even flicker across a single face. A moment ago, Emma had simply been the quiet wife of Ryan Caldwell. Now she stood trembling, stripped down to pale undergarments under a chandelier whose light felt like punishment. Margaret's voice rang out brittle and triumphant. "There she is!" Caught in the act. A gold digger with sticky fingers. She stole my pink diamond necklace. Emma tried to cover herself, clutching what little dignity she still possessed, her heart pounding so violently she could barely force air into her lungs. I did not take anything she whispered, but her voice was drowned beneath murmurs from the guests, all leaning closer, as if her humiliation were part of the evening's entertainment. Ryan stood near the bar, frozen. His navy suit looked freshly pressed, his jaw tense, but he did not move toward her. His eyes flicked from his mother to his father, then toward the prominent business leaders watching. Whatever instinct he had to protect Emma collapsed under the weight of their expectations. Charles Caldwell's stare impaled him with silent command. "Do nothing." Olivia stepped closer, the silver shimmer of her gown catching the light like a weapon. She pointed an accusing finger at Emma. I saw her sneaking around earlier, near Mother's jewelry case. It was obvious she was planning something. The chorus of whispers grew louder, sharper, more vicious. Emma's cheeks burned. Her legs shook. The cool breeze from the open terrace doors brushed her bare skin, but she could not move, could not think. All she could feel was the crushing sense that the ground beneath her had opened and swallowed her whole. Then Charles Caldwell, towering and rigid, spoke with the cold certainty of a man accustomed to being obeyed. "Search her here, in front of everyone. If she is innocent, she has nothing to hide." Emma's breath caught. Her vision blurred. She felt the shame before it even happened, a hot, choking wave that clawed its way up her throat. "Please," she managed, "please do not do this. I did nothing wrong." But Margaret and Olivia were already upon her. Hands grasped her arms. Nails scraped her skin. The crowd tightened, forming a circle around her, trapping her inside their hungry curiosity. Someone laughed softly. Another recorded from a different angle. The string quartet had stopped playing bows, hanging midair in stunned silence. Her dress fell to the marble floor, pooling at her feet like the last remaining piece of her dignity. Emma stood shivering, stripped bare under the merciless glow of the chandelier. Her mind begged her body to run, but her legs refused to obey. She could hear her own heartbeat pounding between the clicking of camera phones. Her humiliation was now permanent, frozen in more devices than she could count. Margaret lifted Emma's dress like a trophy, shaking it out violently, searching the pockets, tearing at the seams. Nothing. Not a single glint of a pink diamond. Margaret's lips curled. She probably hid it somewhere else. Emma's voice cracked. "This is insane. Why would I ever steal from you?" "Because you married my son for money," Margaret spat. "That is all you ever wanted." Emma looked desperately toward Ryan. Her eyes begged for him to choose her just once, to step forward, to say something, anything. But Ryan looked away. That was the moment she broke. Not because of the cameras or the shredding of her clothes, not because 200 strangers watched her fall apart. It was the quiet betrayal in Ryan's silence that hollowed her out completely. Charles motioned to the security guards. "Remove her from the property." Two large men approached without hesitation. They grabbed her by the arms, dragging her through the glittering crowd as though she were a criminal, rather than a bride celebrating her second anniversary. Guests stepped aside quickly, recoiling from her like she carried disease. Someone whispered trash. Another murmured thief. A third chuckled as he kept recording. They hauled her down the marble staircase past the floral arches and crystal towers and shoved her beyond the iron gates of the Caldwell estate. The gates clanged shut behind her, sealing her humiliation. Emma crumpled onto the cold pavement, barely able to draw a breath. The night air stung her exposed skin. Inside the mansion, the music swelled again, laughter rising as if nothing had happened. Emma realized then that she no longer had a single thing left. Not her dignity, not her husband, not even her phone. For a long, agonizing moment she simply sat there, trembling. Then footsteps approached quietly. A young valet, barely 20, slipped off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. No judgment, no hesitation, just human warmth. That tiny kindness cracked open something inside her. Maybe she had nothing left. But she still had someone she could call, and for the first time in years she knew she had to. Emma Carter had once believed that life could be simple. That belief now felt like a distant echo as she sat shivering on the pavement outside the Caldwell estate, clutching the valet's jacket around her trembling body. But before tonight, before the shame and the tearing of silk, before the cameras and the accusations, she had carried a different truth inside her. A truth she had buried so deeply that even the man she married had no idea it existed. She had not always been Emma Carter, at least not the version the world saw now. She had been Emma Sterling, once daughter of Jonathan Sterling, one of the most formidable, self-made billionaires in the United States. She had grown up among glass towers in San Francisco in a world carved by ambition and guarded by private jets, sprawling estates, and an empire known as Carter Global Holdings. Yet power, she had learned early, was both armor and trap. It drew people in, but only to see what they could take. Emma had spent her childhood watching her father navigate smiles sharpened by greed. People courted him not for who he was, but for what he could offer. Deals disguised as friendships. Partnerships disguised as affection. She remembered overhearing hushed conversations in corridors, tones sticky with flattery, always circling the family fortune like vultures waiting for something to die. Her mother had passed when Emma was 12, leaving behind a quiet ache that settled deep in the girl's bones. Jonathan Sterling became both father and mother, fierce protector and distant titan. He loved his daughter with a devotion that could move mountains, but the world he lived in demanded armor, and Emma grew up learning to wear her own. So, on her 18th birthday, desperate to know what it felt like to be chosen for herself and not for the weight of her last name, Emma made a decision that startled even her father. She left California, changed her surname to Carter, and moved to a quiet town in Ohio, where anonymity felt like air finally entering her lungs. Jonathan never tried to stop her. He only held her hands, looked into her eyes, and said, "If you ever need me, truly need me, call. Promise me that." She had promised. And for years she kept that promise buried. In Ohio, she lived simply taking part-time jobs, learning to exist without an entourage, without headlines, without the constant hum of expectation. She wanted to meet people who looked at her face instead of her net worth. She wanted to be valued for her laugh, her thoughts, her heart. That was when she met Ryan Caldwell. They met on campus in Boston when she transferred there for business school. Ryan had an easy charm, warm eyes, and the kind of smile that made a girl forget her fears. He held doors open, remembered the little things she said, and made her laugh at moments when she least expected it. He came from the East Coast upper class, the kind coated in generations of reputation rather than flashy displays of wealth. To Emma, his world felt refined, elegant, almost romantic. And he seemed genuinely kind. When he asked her to marry him a year later, under the autumn leaves in Boston Common, Emma said yes with a heart full of hope. Their wedding was small, intimate, hidden away from both families. She had believed that meant something. A love stripped of pretense, just two people choosing each other. But after the honeymoon reality settled in like a chill beneath the door, the Caldwell family did not welcome her. They tolerated her, assessed her, dissected her. Margaret Caldwell greeted her with a polite smile, sharp enough to cut glass. Charles Caldwell hardly acknowledged her at all. Olivia Caldwell embraced her with sugary compliments, then whispered barbs sharp enough to draw blood. They judged her clothes, her background, her modest lifestyle. They called her plain. They called her unpolished. They called her a girl lucky enough that Ryan had bothered to marry down. Emma told herself to endure, believing love could soften the harshest edges. She clung to the hope that Ryan would one day see the hurt behind her eyes and choose her over their icy approval. But Ryan raised his entire life to maintain the image of the perfect Caldwell son, never pushed back. He let each insult slide. He hid behind silence. And 2 years passed in quiet misery. Yet nothing crushed her quite like the truth. She slowly began to understand they did not simply dislike her. They despised her because they thought she had come from nothing and wanted everything. If only they had known the truth. If only they had known who she really was. If only they had known that the woman they mocked for being powerless had once walked through corridors where power itself bowed in respect. The night they stripped her in front of 200 guests was the night they made the gravest mistake of their lives. Because Emma Carter no longer cared about hiding. And the moment she reached for the phone to call her father, the world she had tried to leave behind began turning in her direction again. For nearly 2 years after the wedding, Emma Carter lived in the shadows of the Caldwell family, navigating a home where every room whispered judgment, and every dinner encounter felt like a test she was destined to fail. The grand brownstone on the Upper East Side with its marble staircase and heavy oil portraits of ancestors glaring from gilded frames never once felt like her home. It felt like a museum of expectations curated by the formidable matriarch who ruled it, Margaret Caldwell. From the first day Emma stepped into that house as Ryan's wife. Margaret's eyes skimmed her outfit, her posture, even the way she breathed as if cataloging every flaw. Her greeting had been soft but icy. "Welcome, dear. I suppose this will take some getting used to." The smile that accompanied the words never reached her eyes. It was the kind of smile that made Emma instinctively pull her cardigan tighter, as though to shield herself. Charles Caldwell was different yet, in his own way, far worse. He did not sneer or criticize. He simply acted as though she did not exist. If Emma walked into a room, he continued reading the newspaper, never acknowledging her presence. If she spoke, he stared past her eyes, drifting toward the window, as though her voice were no more significant than passing traffic. His silence was a blade sharpened through decades of corporate boardrooms and quiet dominance. And then there was Olivia Caldwell, the youngest of the family, a beautiful girl in her early 20s with a smile bright enough to fool anyone who did not know better. To the outside world, she was charming, generous, effortless. To Emma, she was a serpent wrapped in silk. Olivia complimented Emma's dresses only to whisper later to her friends that Emma clearly shopped from clearance racks. She invited Emma to brunch, but spent the entire meal comparing her to the wealthy socialites Ryan could have married instead. She did it all with the softness of honey and the precision of a knife. Emma tried. She tried harder than she ever had in her life. She cooked meals she was never thanked for. She planned small surprises for Ryan that he barely noticed. She attended Caldwell family gatherings despite her stomach twisting into knots at the thought of facing Margaret's scrutiny. She wore clothes she hoped would blend her into their world, though nothing she wore satisfied Margaret, who once remarked, "You dress like a schoolteacher trying to impress her students." Still, Emma believed that patience might win them over. She believed that if she showed kindness long enough, someone in that house would show it back. But every attempt was met with frost. Every smile she offered was swallowed by the cavernous emptiness of Caldwell expectations. What hurt her more than any insult was Ryan's passivity. He never once confronted his family's cruelty. He never said enough. "That is my wife," not a single time. Instead, he patted her arm and murmured, "Just give them time. This is how they are. They will come around." Emma spent night after night wondering why she had to earn her place while Ryan stood firmly in his without effort. She wondered if love was supposed to feel like waiting for someone to choose you every day and never being chosen. The second year of their marriage brought more pain than the first. Emma learned to hide her tears behind bathroom doors and in quiet corners of Central Park where no one knew her name. She learned the hollow ache of being misunderstood, underestimated, dismissed. She learned the kind of loneliness that crept into her bones even when she was surrounded by people. And when Margaret called her unfortunate during a brunch with friends, the table had laughed as though it were harmless a joke among aristocrats. A joke at Emma's expense. Always. The anniversary celebration, Margaret insisted, would be a grand demonstration of family solidarity. Emma desperately wished to say no, wished to flee from the cold perfection of the Caldwell world. But Ryan begged her to go. "Maybe this is their olive branch," he said. Emma, hopeful in that quiet, wounded way she had learned, agreed. But deep down, a small voice whispered a warning. The Caldwell family did not offer olive branches. They sharpened them into stakes. And the night of the anniversary would prove exactly that. The Caldwell anniversary celebration was never meant for Emma Carter. It was Margaret Caldwell's masterpiece, a glittering spectacle in the Hamptons, designed to showcase the family's prestige to every influential figure along the eastern seaboard. The invitation list alone revealed the true purpose: senators, Fortune 500 executives, celebrity philanthropists, heirs and heiresses, groomed for society pages. Not friends, not family, an audience. Emma had hesitated when Ryan first mentioned the event. The thought of returning to the Hamptons estate with its sweeping oceanfront terraces and relentless reminders of where she did not belong sent a cold coil through her chest. But Ryan had clasped her hands and pleaded in that soft, hopeful voice she still wanted to believe. "Maybe this is Mother's way of showing she is ready to accept you." Emma wanted to believe him. She needed to believe him. On the evening of the celebration, she slipped into her cream-colored dress, simple and elegant, the kind of garment that made her feel like herself, rather than a curated version of what the Caldwells expected. She paired it with modest heels, and the only piece of jewelry she wore regularly, a small silver pendant her mother had given her before she passed. She touched it once for courage. When she arrived at the estate, the scale of the event nearly stole her breath. Crystal chandeliers suspended from the ceiling like frozen galaxies. Towers of imported roses climbing along the walls. A string quartet playing beneath an archway draped in orchids. Luxury cars lined the long driveway, their polished surfaces catching moonlight like liquid metal. Emma stepped inside and immediately felt the shift in the air. Heads turned. Conversations paused. Women in gowns worth more than small houses assessed her from head to toe, eyes narrowing with that familiar mixture of disdain and curiosity. Men whispered behind champagne flutes. A photographer's flash briefly illuminated her face, before the photographer realized she was not someone worth capturing and pointed the camera elsewhere. She swallowed hard and forced herself to move forward, reminding herself that she belonged beside Ryan no matter what others thought. But Ryan had barely stepped inside before Charles pulled him away to discuss business with a group of partners. Emma watched her husband disappear into a cluster of executives in tailored suits, leaving her stranded at the edge of a gilded room that seemed to shrink around her. Then Margaret arrived. "Oh, Emma, you came," she said with a smile sharp enough to leave a scar. "How quaint you look." Beside her, Olivia sparkled in a silver gown that clung to her like light itself. She giggled delicately. "We are just thrilled you made it to your own celebration." Emma's skin prickled. She forced a tight smile and murmured that she was happy to be there, though the words tasted wrong in her mouth. As the evening drifted on, she stood alone more often than not, a ghost wandering through the opulence. Every whisper, every lingering stare, pressed against her ribs. Her dress, which she had thought lovely only hours earlier, now seemed painfully plain beside the couture swirling around her. She had begun counting the minutes until she could leave when Margaret stepped onto the small stage near the orchestra and lifted a microphone. A hush fell over the room. It was the moment Emma would later remember as the last calm breath before the storm. Because within the next few minutes, the Caldwell family's most vicious plan would begin unfolding around her, and the night would descend into a darkness she never could have imagined. Margaret Caldwell's voice floated confidently across the ballroom as she thanked her distinguished guests, every syllable perfectly polished for the elite crowd gathered beneath glittering chandeliers. Emma Carter stood at the far edge of the room, hands clasped tightly, trying to blend into the sea of couture and champagne. The music faded. Conversations softened. And then Margaret's expression shifted with theatrical precision. Her hand flew to her throat. "My necklace," she gasped, "my pink diamond necklace. It is gone." A stunned silence dropped over the ballroom. More than 200 guests turned at once, tension crackling like static. Emma's breath caught as Margaret's accusing gaze locked onto her. The spotlight meant for a celebratory toast now isolated Emma beneath its harsh glare. "Emma." Margaret spoke her name like a sentence. Instantly, whispers ignited throughout the room. Phones lifted recording. A senator's wife leaned to her companion, murmuring with pointed disgust. Emma's pulse hammered as Margaret continued, voice trembling in deliberate outrage. "I saw you in my dressing room earlier, near my jewelry case. Would you like to explain yourself?" Emma's words stumbled out. "I was looking for the bathroom. I did not touch anything. Please, this is a misunderstanding." Olivia glided to her mother's side, silver gown shimmering like a blade. "I saw her too," she said sweetly. She was acting suspicious. Very suspicious. The crowd reacted instantly. Murmurs sharpened into judgment. A man near the orchestra muttered thief under his breath. A woman in a diamond choker whispered gold digger like it was fact. Emma searched for Ryan, desperate for him to intervene. But he stood stiffly beside Charles, helpless eyes flicking between his mother and the powerful guests watching. And he said nothing. Charles Caldwell stepped forward, voice cutting through the room like ice. "Search her. Here. Now. If she is innocent, she has nothing to hide." Emma staggered back, shaking her head. "You cannot be serious." But they were. The crowd tightened around her like a closing fist. Margaret and Olivia moved with predatory certainty. Emma raised her hands defensively, clutching her dress, her voice cracking in desperation. "Please do not do this. I did nothing wrong." Margaret seized her arm. Olivia seized the other. The zipper snapped loudly, echoing through the silent ballroom. Emma let out a broken cry as the gown tore free and fell to the marble floor. Gasps erupted. Phones flashed. The string quartet froze mid-note. Emma stood trembling in her undergarments beneath the unforgiving chandelier light, every inch of her humiliation captured by an audience hungry for scandal. Margaret lifted the discarded dress and shook it violently. Nothing, she declared, but she must have hidden it elsewhere. Emma wrapped her arms around herself, voice shaking. "This is madness. I did not steal your necklace." Charles's command boomed across the room. "Remove her from the property." Security guards rushed forward. Emma looked at Ryan one last time, pleading silently for him to save her. He turned away. Something in her chest shattered. The guards dragged her through the ballroom as guests parted, some recoiling, others filming. Insults hissed past her. Trash. Thief. Pathetic. She stumbled down the marble steps and into the cold night air. They shoved her beyond the iron gates and let them slam shut behind her. Emma collapsed onto the pavement, sobbing uncontrollably. Inside the mansion, the music started again, cruel in its indifference. Then a gentle voice broke through her shaking breaths. "Miss, are you okay?" The young valet knelt beside her, his face filled with sympathy. Without hesitation, he draped his jacket over her bare shoulders. Emma clutched the warm fabric. She had lost everything. Her dignity, her home, her husband. Even her phone remained inside the mansion. Nothing was left except one promise she had made long ago. With trembling hands, she borrowed the valet's phone and dialed the one number she still knew by heart. "Dad," she whispered when Jonathan Sterling answered. I need you right now." Jonathan Sterling did not need more than a few words to understand his daughter was in danger. The moment he heard Emma's trembling voice break through the line, something ancient and ruthless awakened inside him. He rose from his desk in his San Francisco penthouse office with a quiet, lethal calm that made his security team straighten instinctively. His voice, usually warm when speaking to his daughter, dropped to a tone colder than steel. "Do not move, sweetheart," he said. "I am coming for you. And Emma, they have no idea what they just started." He hung up before she could respond. Within minutes, the entire Sterling security unit was mobilized. Drivers, guards, pilots. It was not simply a rescue, it was an operation. 10 black SUVs rolled out like a private convoy. A limousine, the same one Jonathan used for presidential-level meetings, followed. Overhead, the Sterling helicopter lifted into the sky, its rotors slicing the night as it tracked the route to the Caldwell estate in the Hamptons. Meanwhile, Emma, still huddled beneath the valet's jacket, waited in the cold darkness beyond the gates. She clutched the fabric tightly, fighting the violent tremors that racked her body. Shame and heartbreak lingered on her skin like frost. The valet remained beside her silent, except for occasional reassurances that help was coming. He did not know who her father was, but the urgency in her voice had been enough. Then the night exploded into sound. First came the deep growl of engines, heavy and synchronized. The young valet looked up, stunned. Emma lifted her head just as the long line of black SUVs turned onto the private road leading to the estate. Their headlights cut through the darkness like blades. Behind them, the limousine glided forward with regal precision. And above a helicopter descended low, its spotlight sweeping across the mansion grounds, as if exposing every secret the Caldwell family had tried to hide. Inside the ballroom, the music faltered. Guests rushed to the windows, startled murmurs rising like wind. "Who is that? Is it the police? Is someone important arriving?" They had no idea how important. The convoy stopped at the gates. Guards who had dragged Emma out now, stiffened fear flickering in their eyes. The lead SUV door opened, and Jonathan Sterling stepped out. He was a tall man in his early 60s, broad-shouldered, dressed in a black suit, tailored with the kind of precision only old money could command. His silver hair gleamed beneath the helicopter's light. His eyes, usually gentle for his daughter, were now burning with a fury cold enough to freeze oceans. Power radiated from him like heat. He walked straight to Emma. Her breath caught as he wrapped his arms around her, pulling her into a protective embrace. He took off his own coat, warmer and heavier than the valet's, and enveloped her in it. Emma pressed her face against his chest, finally letting herself sob. "I am here now, baby girl." When he pulled back, the softness vanished from his face. Jonathan turned toward the mansion, his voice rising like rolling thunder. "Which one of you laid a hand on my daughter?" The gates, which moments before had felt like a prison, swung open without resistance. Even the guards stepped aside. Jonathan did not pause. Surrounded by his security detail, followed by his lawyers and the city's police commissioner who had been summoned personally, he strode into the Caldwell estate as if he owned it. And in ways they did not yet understand, he almost did. Guests parted at the sight of him, whispers erupting. Some recognized his face. Others recognized his power. All felt the shift in the air, the terrifying realization that the night's cruelty was about to be repaid, not with anger, with something far more devastating: precision, calculation, truth. Jonathan Sterling had arrived. And the world of the Caldwells would never be the same. The moment Jonathan Sterling stepped into the Caldwell ballroom, the atmosphere changed so sharply, it felt like the temperature had dropped. Conversations died mid-sentence. Champagne flutes froze halfway to painted lips. 200 elegant guests turned toward the entrance as if an invisible force had commanded their attention. Jonathan did not acknowledge a single one of them. His stride was purposeful, his gaze a blade slicing through the stunned crowd. Behind him moved his private security team, dark suits and earpieces gleaming under the chandeliers. His lawyers followed with briefcases in hand. The New York City Police Commissioner, summoned by Jonathan personally, walked beside them with a grave expression. Emma trailed close to her father, wrapped in his coat, her body still trembling, but her fear replaced gradually by something steadier. Safety, protection, a sense of finally being seen. Margaret Caldwell stepped forward, outrage twisting her features. "What is the meaning of this? You cannot just storm into our private event." Jonathan smiled. It was not kind. It was the kind of smile that made powerful men step back. "Am I interrupting?" he said calmly. "Wonderful. I have something important to address. I believe your guests should hear it too." He took the microphone straight from Margaret's hand. She tried to protest, but her voice was swallowed by the hush that fell across the room. "Good evening," Jonathan began. "My name is Jonathan Sterling." A ripple tore through the ballroom. Whispers erupted instantly. People who had seen him only on news channels seemed to straighten instinctively. Others searched their memories, trying to place the face. But the older guests, those who understood global power, already paled. "Sterling," someone gasped. As in, "Carter, Global Holdings." Jonathan nodded once. "Carter, Global Holdings, Sterling Innovations, Sterling Financial Group." "Yes, that's Sterling." Margaret's face blanched, as if all color had been drained at once. "This woman you humiliated tonight." Jonathan continued gesturing for Emma to step beside him. "Is my daughter, my only child, my heir." The reaction was immediate. Gasps, hands flying to mouths, eyes widening. Phones lifted again, but now the tone had changed. This was no longer entertainment. This was revelation. Consequence. "Many of you may be confused," Jonathan said. "That is because my daughter chose to live modestly. She changed her name. She wanted to find love for who she was not, for the weight of her inheritance." He let the room sit in silence, the truth sinking in. And this is how you treated her." Jonathan snapped his fingers. Instantly, the ballroom's massive screens flickered to life. The slideshow of Emma and Ryan's smiling photos vanished, replaced by security footage Jonathan had quietly installed months earlier. The first video showed Olivia sneaking into Margaret's dressing room hours before the party. She opened her mother's jewelry box, took the pink diamond necklace, and slipped it into her purse. A collective gasp sliced through the crowd. The second video showed Olivia in the garden, kneeling beside a rose bush, burying the necklace under the soil. The third was the most damning. Margaret and Olivia in a private lounge, the audio crystal clear. Olivia whispered, "Are you sure about this?" And Margaret replied, "Absolutely. If we accuse her of stealing and humiliate her badly enough, Ryan will have no choice but to divorce her. She will be gone for good." The room fell into horrified silence. Olivia crumpled to the floor. Margaret began to tremble violently. Jonathan's voice turned sharp as a blade. "Do either of you care to explain?" Margaret opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Olivia sobbed uncontrollably, shaking her head, denying through tears, even as the evidence shone above them. Jonathan did not wait. "My attorneys will be pressing charges: theft, defamation, assault, conspiracy, and of course, emotional abuse." Margaret let out a broken sob.